Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I am Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Thank you to those of you who already subscribed to the channel. If you haven't done so yet, please do. Please fuel the algorithm with us. Like the video, leave a comment, share the video. Those are all the things that help grow this platform. I appreciate your support a ton. Thank you so much for your future support of the Daily Dose. Today's the 4th of July. I've got my red, white, and blue on. These are little stars. These aren't polka dots. I'm festive. We're a little late getting the episode out today because, like every good American, we were at a parade. And I take it back. I really dislike parades, but I was there with my family anyways, celebrating America. I hope everybody is having a good 4th of July as well. A good Independence Day. And if you're not watching a movie with Will Smith in it, then I'm glad you're here with us to talk a little bit about BYU's Independence Era of football. Let's see the play we made there. I know we've been focused a ton on the Big 12 and the end of independence, but because it is the 4th of July, because it is Independence Day, it feels right to release this isn't anybody else's opinion, but my All-Independent Era BYU football team. That's what we're going to do today. This is one team. There's not a first team and a second team where we're talking about every player who ever made an impact at BYU over the last 10 years. This is one team, which means that we've got to make some pretty controversial decisions. Controversial decision number one, I'm going to start with the special teams because usually everybody wants to focus on the offense and the defense. And then by the time you get done with that, you tune out before the special teams are here. But we're going to talk about special teams today. Here we go. All independent era special teams at BYU. I've got Jake Oldroyd. Why? Because I remember his green cleats. I remember the clutch field goal against Arizona. I remember clutch field goals against Tennessee. That crazy comeback, that crazy story, Zach Wilson, Michael Simon, all of that stuff. That doesn't happen. We don't talk about it if Jake Oldroyd doesn't run onto the field at a dead sprint and kick a field goal. Jake Oldroyd, by and large, was pretty clutch. I know he had some ups and downs in his career, but what college kicker doesn't? Jake Oldroyd was great for BYU, and he was great for BYU for a really long time. Ryan Ricow, anytime you have an average punt better than 46 yards for your career, you're going to get the nod on the all-independent era football team from me. It's that simple. I don't think we have to spend a ton of time talking about it. Ryan Ricow is fantastic. As returners, Adam Hine is probably the best return man at BYU that we really don't talk about very much. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't doing it with jukes and making people miss. He was just really good at finding a crease and hitting that crease exceptionally hard. BYU consistently had good field position when Adam Hine touched the ball. He protected the ball. He did well. At punt return, I've got J.D. Falslev, and I have him just ahead of Dax Milne, just ahead of Aleva Hifo, and it's because he was a little bit more productive in terms of getting field position. But by and large, BYU, especially over the last, over the entire Independence era, has valued ball security from their punt returners more than go make a play. And probably because they haven't had a Britton Covey-like guy who can go and make plays as a return man. But J.D. Falslev, I think, was the best return man that BYU has had, although all three of them that I just named are pretty similar to one another. Okay, now let's get into the offense and the defense and the stuff that people really want to talk about. At the quarterback position, you could go a number of ways. You could go Jaron Hall. You could go Zach Wilson. You could even make a case, though I don't know that he's going to be better than fourth, but he's got a strong case to make that Riley Nelson had some pretty big moments for BYU as well. I have to give the nod to Taysom Hill. Why? Because of what he did for BYU off the field. On the field, he was fantastic. Nearly 10,000 total yards in his career, 75 touchdowns accounted for. I mean, Taysom Hill was special, and everybody knows that. But he also kept BYU relevant during the thick of football independence. Without Taysom Hill, I don't know that ESPN talks about BYU any more than they have to. I don't know that LaVell Edwards Stadium consistently averages north of 50, 55,000 people in attendance at games if Taysom Hill is not the quarterback. He is the kind of guy, he had a miniature Jimmer-like effect on the football team where you went to watch BYU play because you wanted to watch Taysom Hill play. And because of that, I give him the nod over Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall, who were probably better quarterbacks, but Taysom was pretty darn good too. And he had that off the field impact that I don't know that the other two had. At the running back spot, Tyler Algier, Jamal Williams, there's no debate. I don't think that's even a question. These are two of BYU's best running backs of all time, much less during just the Independence era. Tyler Algier, of course, came to BYU as a walk-on, played defense. He was probably an NFL linebacker if he wanted to be. Finally got a chance to stick at the running back spot. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, including the all-time single-season rushing record at BYU. And who can forget his Thor's hammer play where he just punches the ball out of the Arizona State linebacker to really seal the game, save the game for BYU. Jamal Williams, his career was special as well. He nearly had 4,000 career rushing yards, had a pair of 1,000-yard-plus seasons. He was really, really good for BYU, but it was also the fact that he chose to stay. After he was dismissed from BYU and had to walk away for honor code related reasons, Jamal could have gone anywhere. He could have gone to the SEC, he could have gone to the Pac-12, but Jamal chose to sit out for a year, work on his own game on his own, and then come back to BYU. That is loyalty. That is special. And that's the kind of stuff that gets you a spot on the all-independent team. At wide receiver, it's easy to forget how good Cody Hoffman was. All he did was set the all-time receiving record at BYU. He didn't have the professional success, and so I think we tend to forget a little bit about him as time goes on. But just do yourself a favor. Go watch Cody Hoffman's BYU highlights on YouTube. The dude was a human highlight reel. At the other wide receiver spot, I went with Puka Nacua. You have a strong case to make for Dax Milne. I gave Puka the nod because of how he showed up in big moments. That Boise State game winner, even the first touch that he had on the season against USF where he took it to the house for 75 yards. When BYU needed a big play, Puka Nacua was that guy. So I give him the nod over some of the other very worthy candidates. At tight end, you could have gone Matt Bushman. You could have gone, Devin Mahina, Kane Friel. I give Isaac Rex the nod. And I know people will say Matt Bushman probably deserves it, but I like Isaac Rex a little bit more than I like Matt Bushman. I think that, I know it's the Big 12, but I think he'll cement that in people's minds this year. He was elite. People forget how good he was prior to his ankle injury in 2020. Isaac Rex is a special, special tight end. The fact that he played it all last year shows how dedicated he was to BYU to getting back on the field. And of course, he's the Elk. So we've got to give love to our guy. On the offensive line, I took a little creative liberty here. Blake Freeland and Brady Christensen. How could I leave one of them off? I didn't. Blake Freeland did play right tackle his first year as a starter. Therefore, he's right tackle on the all-independent team. Found a loophole, got the 2 All-American left tackles in for BYU. There's not really any debate or discussion needed. Brady Christensen, Blake Freeland, all-timers at BYU. Absolutely special. Now Kingsley Suamataia is doing his thing, following the act of Christensen and Freeland. It's a big deal for Kingsley. The left tackle spot really had been kind of a dry area for BYU for a long time. Riker Matthews was on this list. I mean, he did play at BYU during the Independent Era, but it's been a long time, with the exception of Matthews, before any offensive tackle had a huge impact at BYU. Brady Christensen came, got the ball rolling. Blake Freeland kept it going. And now Kingsley Suamataia is probably the best of the bunch. At left guard, I know Clark Barrington is playing for Baylor, and that stings, but we cannot forget what he did for BYU during his career here. For 4 years, he locked down the left guard spot and was consistently one of the best offensive guards in the country, according to Pro Football Focus. At center, I've got Tijon Karoma just ahead of James Empey because he came to BYU at a time when the offensive line was in so much flux. It had played so poorly, and Tijon comes as a 2-star who's 6 feet tall, 6'1", has no expectations, and all he did was lock down the center spot for his entire BYU career. So I give him the nod just over James Empey. And at right guard, Chandon Herring. Dude was freaky athletic, and he just consistently and quietly got the job done week in and week out. Now, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot of fun memories here, a lot of fun players to talk about. We'll start at defensive end with Bronson Kafusi, 25 and a half career sacks. I'm going to give him 26 career sacks. Why? Because I'll never forget the way that he leveled that dude on Gonzaga playing basketball. So he gets his 26th sack on the hardwood, on the gridiron. He was electric. And let's not forget, he did play linebacker one year to showcase that versatility. Bronson Kafusi was special, and BYU has been looking for the next Bronson Kafusi since he left. On the inside of the defensive line, Kairos Tonga and Romney Fuga, two different types of defensive tackles. Kairos Tonga was about making plays, and he was somebody that offensive linemen had to play around because he could blow things up on his own. And Romney Fuga, people forget how much Bronco loved Romney Fuga. All those linebackers, Kyle Van Noy and Alani Fua and Spencer Hadley, all those linebackers during that era, they made plays because Romney Fuga was eating up blocks and doing things in the middle of that defensive line that allowed the linebackers to stay free. Romney Fuga was a special player. He just played a really unglamorous nose tackle spot. On the other defensive end spot, Ziggy Ansah, who can forget his story, comes over from Ghana to play basketball, doesn't know how to put pads on, figures it out, and ultimately goes on to get drafted in the first round by the Detroit Lions. Ziggy was great. He did not have the overall career numbers at BYU because he didn't know how to play football. He had to figure that out. But once he did, when he was on the field, he made a huge impact for the Cougars. Ziggy Ansah is a special story. These linebackers, I don't know what there is to say. Kyle Van Noy, he was Mr. Everything, probably the best overall player on either side of the ball for BYU during the Independence era. Sione Takitake, who could forget 19 tackles in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, also has a pretty cool story in his own right that he didn't have to come back to BYU, but he chose to. Great story. Now he's doing his thing in the NFL. Fred Warner, it's easy to remember him now because he's the best linebacker in the NFL. But before he was drafted by the 49ers, Fred Warner was a steady and solid contributor for BYU. He played a lot of coverage. He was a pass breakup god from the linebacker spot. When he got the ball in his hands, he took it to the house. Let's not forget that pick six against Boise State. I think he broke, by my unofficial count, 37 tackles on his way to the end zone. Just a special play by a very special player. That trio of linebackers gives me chills of Van Noy, Takitake, and Warner. Absolute studs. In the secondary, I've got Diane Gunwoluku at the cornerback spot. Another story that he didn't have to stick around at BYU. He was not eligible to play during his first season in Provo, but he stuck it out. He worked hard, worked on the scout team, and then once he got into the lineup for the Cougars, he was unbelievable, and you could not keep him off the field. Whether he was playing nickel or outside or even safety, Diane Lake was making plays for BYU. There's a few other options you could have gone with opposite of Diane Lake. You could have gone Chris Wilcox. You could have gone Michael Davis. I went with Caleb Hayes. The guy just consistently broke up passes. He was always right there in the right spot for BYU. And when it comes to these other guys, you really have to split hairs because all of them were very good. But Caleb Hayes did it with against the biggest number, the most amount of Power 5 schools. He played the toughest schedule. Therefore, he gets the nod in my book over Davis and Wilcox. The safety spot, Daniel Sorensen is a special player. He was the unsung hero of that elite 2012 defense and that not quite as elite, but still pretty darn elite 2013. Danny Sorensen was fantastic. Danny Sorensen did everything he needed to do, and he's got a very strong case to make as the best safety to ever play at BYU. And alongside him, I've got Kai Nakua just ahead of Craig Bills, just ahead of Austin Lee. Kai Nakua, another one with a strong case to make as best safety to ever play at BYU. The guy just found the ball. He had a nose for the ball. He was constantly pulling in interceptions. He remember the pick six where Tom Homo was begging him on the sidelines to get down against Boise State and let the clock run out. Instead, he takes it to the house. And instead of a close game that's won by a Hail Mary and a late interception, BYU looks like they beat Boise State by 2 scores, and the game was never close. Kai Nakua is a BYU legend. There is no question about it. So there you go, folks. That is my all-independent team for BYU football. during the independent era of BYU. Strong apologies, I guess, to Jaron Hall, to Zach Wilson. And there's a lot of guys who were very, very good for BYU that did not make this team. Connor Pay did not make the cut. BYU's had some really special players over the years, over the Independence era. It's been a lot of fun. Today is still the 4th of July. Go spend time with your families. Go get outside. Go watch some fireworks. Eat some hamburgers and some hot dogs. Whatever you got to do. Go watch a Will Smith movie. Do something to celebrate. And then when you get back, come tell me everywhere that I went wrong and how you would release the All-Independent Era team for BYU. Thank you for your support. And until next time, give them hell.